She murdered young girls and bathed in their blood for eternal youth. You hear the screaming first, not all at once, just one voice, then another, echoing through stone corridors that swallow sound like a tomb. The girls don't know where they are. They were promised work, safety, a place in a great household. Now they're here, in the cold, in the dark, and the door is locked from the outside. One of them presses her face to the iron grate. She sees torchlight. She sees movement. And then she sees her, the pale woman with black eyes and a smile that doesn't reach her face. The woman who owns this castle. The woman who has been waiting. Before we go any further, I'd love to know, where in the world are you right now? It's wild to think that a story this dark, from so long ago, is being watched by people in every time zone on Earth. If you're into these deep dives into history's most chilling figures, hit that like button and let me know in the comments where you're from. Now let me pull back the curtain and tell you where this nightmare actually took place. The year is 1610. The place, a fortress in the Carpathian Mountains in what is now Slovakia, but was then the Kingdom of Hungary. This castle, Chaktica, sits on a hill like a predator watching the valley below. It belongs to one of the most powerful families in Europe, the Báthorys. And its mistress is a woman named Elizabeth, Countess Elizabeth Báthory, widow, aristocrat, landowner. And if the records are to be believed, one of the most prolific serial killers in human history. Now, we're not talking about rumors or folklore here. We're talking about court depositions, witness testimony, confessions extracted under torture, yes, but also corroborating evidence from servants, villagers, and even members of her own household. By the time the authorities moved on her, the body count was staggering. Some said 80, others whispered 200, a few claimed over 600. The truth? We may never know. But what we do know is this. For years, girls vanished into that castle, and very few came out. So how does a woman born into nobility, wealth, and privilege become this? Let's go back to the beginning. Elizabeth Báthory was born in 1560 into one of the most powerful families in Hungary. The Báthorys weren't just rich, they were kingmakers. Her uncle was the Prince of Transylvania. Her cousin became King of Poland. This was a family that shaped empires, and Elizabeth was raised in that world. Educated, multilingual, tutored in Latin, German, and Greek. She was brilliant. She was proud. And she was married off at 15 to a war hero named Ferenc Nadasdy, a man known as the Black Knight of Hungary. He was older, brutal in battle, and often away, leading campaigns against the Ottoman Empire. For years, Elizabeth ran the estate alone. She managed lands, oversaw hundreds of servants, and lived in a world where her word was law. But here's where the cracks begin to show. According to later testimony, the violence didn't start after her husband died. It started while he was alive. Quietly. In the shadows. A servant girl beaten to death for a minor offense. Another tortured for stealing food. The records suggest Ferenc may have even participated, or at least turned a blind eye. In that world, the life of a peasant girl was worth less than a horse. No one asked questions, no one investigated, and so the cruelty grew, unchecked, like a weed in fertile soil. Then, in 1604, Ferenc died. Elizabeth was a widow at 44, and with him gone, there was no one left to restrain her. Here's where the story takes its darkest turn, because what happened next wasn't just cruelty, it was ritualized, methodical. And according to survivors, it was driven by something even more disturbing than rage. Vanity. The legend you've probably heard, the bloodbaths, may or may not be true. Some historians think it was propaganda, added later to demonize her. But what is documented in trial records is this. Elizabeth Báthory believed that the blood of young girls could preserve her youth. Witnesses testified that she would have girls brought to her chambers, where they were beaten, burned, cut, and bled. Some said she bathed in the blood. Others said she drank it. One servant recalled seeing a girl's body drained and pale, lying on the floor like a discarded doll. And the method of recruitment? chillingly calculated. At first she targeted peasant girls, daughters of farmers and servants, people with no power and no voice. She'd offer them jobs in the castle, as seamstresses, maids, companions. Their families were desperate. They said yes, and once the girls entered Chaktich, they disappeared. But here's the thing, Elizabeth got sloppy. Or maybe she got bored. Because eventually, she started going after daughters of lesser nobility. Girls whose families did have connections. Girls whose disappearances couldn't be ignored. That's when the whispers started reaching the royal court. Imagine being a mother in that region. Your daughter is of age to be married, or to work in a noble house, a common path to a better life. Then one day, a letter arrives from Chaktich Castle, an invitation, a position for your girl. You feel relief, pride even. But weeks pass, then months, and no word comes. You write, no reply, you ask around, and that's when you hear it, the rumor, spoken in low voices at the market. Don't send your daughters there. They don't come back. By 1610, the rumors had become impossible to suppress. A Lutheran minister named István Magyari wrote a letter to the king, accusing Elizabeth of murder. Normally this would go nowhere. She was too powerful, too connected. But this time, there was political pressure. Her cousin, the prime minister, Thurzo, was under scrutiny. If he didn't act, it would look like the nobility was above the law. So he did something almost unthinkable. He authorized a raid. On December 30th, 1610, Thurzo and a group of soldiers arrived at Chaktich Castle unannounced. What they found inside became the stuff of nightmares. The testimonies from that night are fragmented but consistent. One soldier reported seeing a girl lying in the entryway, still alive but dying from wounds. Another found a body in a storage room, drained of blood. In the cells below the castle, they discovered girls imprisoned, some barely able to stand, covered in burns and cuts. One girl's testimony later described being tortured with heated irons, her flesh seared while the Countess watched. Another said she was forced to stand naked in the snow, while servants poured freezing water over her body until she collapsed. But here's what haunts me most. Some of the girls still hoped they'd be saved. They thought this was the rescue, that someone had finally come. And in a way, someone had. But not in time. Not for most of them. Elizabeth's servants were arrested immediately. 4 of them, her closest accomplices, were put on trial. And here, under torture and testimony, the full scope of the horror came out. A woman named Dorothea Sentis, known as Dorka, confessed to helping kill over 36 girls. Another servant, Ilona Yo, said the number was closer to 50. A third claimed to have seen a registry, a ledger, kept by Elizabeth herself, listing over 600 names. That ledger was never found, but the testimonies were enough. In January 1611, the servants were executed. Dorka and Ilona had their fingers torn out with red-hot pincers before being burned alive. A third servant was beheaded. The message was clear. This kind of evil would not be tolerated. But here's the twist. The woman at the center of it all, the Countess herself, never stood trial. Why? Because she was nobility, and noble blood in that world was untouchable. Even accused of mass murder, Elizabeth Báthory could not be publicly tried or executed. It would have been a scandal that shook the entire aristocracy. So instead, they did something worse. They erased her. She was walled into her own castle. Let that sink in. Not imprisoned in a dungeon, not exiled. Walled in. Masons came to Chaktich and bricked up the windows and doors of her chambers, leaving only a small slot for food and air. She would spend the rest of her life in those rooms, alone, in darkness. No trial, no appeal. Just silence. For over 3 years, she lived like that. And on August 21st, 1614, she was found dead. She was 54 years old. The official cause? Unknown. Some say illness, others starvation. A few whisper suicide. But no one really knows. Because by then, no one cared. Her body was buried quietly without ceremony. No marker. Her name was forbidden to be spoken in polite society. And her story? It became a legend, a warning, a ghost story parents told their children to keep them from wandering too far into the woods. But here's the thing about stories like this. They don't just fade, they echo. For centuries, the tale of Elizabeth Báthory has been retold, reshaped, exaggerated. Some turned her into a vampire, others, a feminist martyr, a powerful woman destroyed by jealous men. The truth, as always, is more complicated. Yes, there was likely political motivation behind her downfall. Yes, some details were probably embellished. But the core of it, the testimonies, the bodies, the survivors, and that's real. That happened. And the question that lingers isn't just how this could happen, it's why. Why would a woman of such intelligence, such privilege, descend into this kind of madness? Was it vanity? Cruelty? Mental illness? Boredom? Power unchecked for too long? Maybe it was all of those things, or maybe it was something simpler and darker. She had the power, and no one stopped her. Until they did. There's a detail I haven't mentioned yet, one that didn't make it into most of the retellings but appears in the trial records. Among the testimonies, there's a moment where one of the servants describes Elizabeth looking at herself in a mirror after one of the killings. She was covered in blood, hands, face, dress, and she smiled, not out of joy, but out of satisfaction, as if she'd accomplished something, as if she believed it was working. That image, of a woman so consumed by the fear of aging, of losing power, of fading into irrelevance, that she would destroy others to preserve herself. It's the heart of the horror, because it's not alien, it's human. Twisted, monstrous, yes, but human. And maybe that's why this story still gets told, why it still gets watched, why we still lean in, horrified and fascinated, when we hear about the Countess who bathed in blood. Today, Countess Castle still stands. It's a ruin now, crumbling on its hill, open to tourists and ghost hunters and curious travelers. The locals avoid it. They say it's cursed, that you can still hear screams in the wind, that shadows move in the stones where no shadow should be. I don't know if I believe that. But I do know this. History doesn't forget. It just buries things. And sometimes, if you dig deep enough, you find something that should have stayed in the ground. Elizabeth Báthory wasn't a vampire. She wasn't a myth. She was a real woman who did real unforgivable things. And the girls she killed? They were real too. They had names, families, futures, and all of that was taken from them, in the dark, behind castle walls, by someone who thought she was untouchable. She wasn't. In the end, the walls closed in. But the story? The story got out. And it will never be buried again.